Fox News alert, the FBI's recovered new images from Nancy Guthrie's home cameras. Pictures from her front door, driveway, and backyard show people and cars in the days leading up to her disappearance. But they're still missing critical footage of the night she went missing.
Security footage from Nancy Guthrie's home in Tucson has just revealed something investigators cannot easily explain. The property had multiple cameras positioned around the house, quietly recording movement around the yard. One watched the swimming pool area, another monitored the backyard, and a third kept an eye on the narrow side yard beside the house. For weeks, forensic technicians worked to recover whatever fragments of data those systems might still hold.
And sources say that's odd. And the FBI says they don't have any plans to release the new images. And they're still hunting for new leads. They've even reportedly questioned employees at a Mexican restaurant where Nancy taped a segment with Savannah for the Today Show months before she vanished.
Eventually, they were able to extract small motion-triggered thumbnails from the devices. The images confirmed that the cameras had been functioning normally. They captured neighbors walking nearby in earlier days. They recorded routine activity around the property. And after Nancy was reported missing, they even documented law enforcement officers moving through the yard during the search. Everything about the systems appeared normal, except for one moment. On the night of February 1st, 2026, the night someone entered the property and took 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie from her own home, every single camera failed to capture anything at all. No movement, no shadows, no figures crossing the yard. Just silence in the record. That strange gap has now become one of the most unsettling details in the entire investigation. To understand why investigators are focused on those missing moments, we need to go back to the beginning.
What made you want to stay in Tucson and plant roots?
And so wonderful. Just the air, the quality of life is laid back and gentle. Yeah, I like to watch the javelina eat my plants.
But the best thing about Tucson is coming home and
Yes.
seeing you guys. Should we raise a glass? Prickly pear margarita? Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
Love you.
Love you.
Nancy Guthrie lived alone in the foothills just outside Tucson. The neighborhood, known as the Catalina Foothills, is quiet and residential. The kind of place where neighbors recognize each other's cars and evenings usually pass without incident. Nancy was 84 years old, a grandmother, and someone who had spent decades building a simple and predictable life. Her daughter Savannah Guthrie is known nationally as a co-anchor on the Today Show, while her other daughter Annie lives nearby in Tucson. Nancy's days followed a familiar routine. Friends described her as independent and mentally sharp despite her age. She attended church services online every Sunday morning and regularly spoke with friends and family throughout the week. People in her life expected consistency from her. When she missed something scheduled, it immediately stood out. On Friday evening, January 31st, Nancy visited her daughter Annie for dinner. The home was only a few miles away, a short drive through the foothills. According to family members, the evening was normal. They talked, shared a meal, and eventually prepared to head home for the night. Later that evening, Nancy was driven back to her house. She walked inside sometime around 9:45 p.m. Nothing about the moment seemed unusual. No one watching could have guessed it might be the last confirmed time she entered her home. The following morning, Nancy was supposed to join a friend online for their weekly church broadcast. It was a routine they rarely missed. When the service began and Nancy did not log in, the friend noticed. At first, it seemed like a simple delay. Minutes passed, then more time passed. Eventually, concerns started to grow. Calls were placed. Messages were sent. No response came back. By midday on February 1st, the situation had escalated. Nancy's family contacted authorities and reported her missing. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to her home in the Catalina Foothills to perform a welfare check. What they found outside the residence immediately changed the tone of the investigation. There was blood on the front porch. Forensic teams were called to the scene and the area was secured. Samples were collected and sent for testing. When the results came back, investigators confirmed the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie. The evidence strongly suggested that something violent had occurred right outside the front door. Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed the situation publicly. Based on what investigators had seen at the scene, He explained that this did not appear to be a case of an elderly woman simply leaving her home and becoming lost. The physical evidence suggested that Nancy had been taken against her will. Authorities described Nancy as a vulnerable adult because of her age and the medications she relied on daily. But they also emphasized something important. She was mentally aware. She did not suffer from dementia or cognitive decline. Nancy Guthrie was fully capable of understanding her surroundings, which meant that if someone came to her door during the night, she likely knew something was wrong. Within hours, the investigation expanded rapidly. Detectives began interviewing neighbors. Search teams started combing the surrounding desert terrain. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case soon afterward because the circumstances suggested a possible abduction. Search dogs, investigators, and volunteers moved through the foothills surrounding Nancy's home. At the same time, detectives began collecting surveillance footage from nearby houses. Cameras are common in modern neighborhoods, and investigators hoped one of them might reveal who had approached Nancy's property during the night. For several days, the search produced no major breakthroughs, but 10 days after Nancy disappeared, investigators revealed that one camera had captured something extremely important.
Nancy's been missing for 6 weeks now. Police still don't have any updates. The sheriff, he's still talking, telling Tucson, lock your door.
We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted, but we're not 100% sure of that. And so it'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. No, keep your wits about you.
So this was a targeted hit, but neighbors should be worried? It's been almost 2 months. We need more answers. The sheriff only has theories.
I think from day one, we had some strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished.
Do you believe it was a burglary gone wrong?
I'm not going to get into those theories. We have our beliefs. Everybody else has theirs.
So no updates, no suspects.
On February 10th, investigators released images recovered from a doorbell camera mounted outside Nancy's front entrance. The device was a Google Nest doorbell, a system designed to record motion activity and upload video to cloud storage. According to officials, technicians were able to recover fragments of footage that had already been transmitted to servers before the device was disabled. That recovery process involved cooperation between investigators and engineers working with Google. When the images were finally made public, they immediately drew national attention. The footage showed a person approaching Nancy's home during the early hours of February 1st. The individual was dressed almost entirely in dark clothing and wore gloves that concealed their hands. Their face was hidden behind a mask. Slung over their shoulder was a dark backpack identified by investigators as an Ozark Trail hiking bag. One detail stood out almost immediately. The person appeared to be carrying a firearm. A holstered handgun was visible positioned across the individual's midsection. The first video clip lasted roughly 27 seconds. In that short window, the person walked toward the front door, paused, and raised a gloved hand toward the doorbell camera. They tapped the device as if attempting to knock it loose or disable it. When that attempt failed, the individual reached for a nearby potted plant and removed pieces of vegetation. The branches were then pressed over the camera lens. A second clip showed the same figure facing directly toward the camera. A flashlight was clenched between their teeth while their hands worked to cover the lens completely. Within moments, the view disappeared. Investigators later confirmed that the doorbell camera stopped transmitting at approximately 1:47 a.m. At first glance, it appeared the suspect had successfully destroyed the evidence. But the system had already uploaded portions of the video before the lens was covered. Those fragments were preserved remotely and eventually retrieved by investigators. The FBI described the person seen in the footage as someone they urgently wanted to identify. Based on physical estimates, investigators believe the individual is male, standing roughly between 5'9" and 5'10" with an average build. Detectives also noted that the clothing and mask worn by the suspect appeared relatively common. According to Sheriff Chris Nanos, investigators believe the items may have been purchased from a large retail chain such as Walmart. Images of the backpack were distributed widely in hopes someone might recognize it. But the doorbell camera was only one part of Nancy's home security system. Around the property were 3 additional motion-activated cameras. One monitored the swimming pool area behind the house. Another watched the backyard. The third covered a narrow side yard that ran along the edge of the home. For weeks, forensic technicians attempted to recover any data stored on those devices. Eventually, they succeeded in extracting a series of motion-triggered thumbnail images. Those images showed activity in the days before Nancy disappeared. They captured neighbors walking through nearby areas and routine movement around the property. After the disappearance, they even documented investigators and search teams working near the pool during the initial investigation. But the most important night told a different story. During the exact time window when someone approached Nancy's front door, disabled her doorbell camera, and possibly forced their way into the home, the other cameras recorded nothing. No movement in the backyard. No movement in the side yard. No activity near the pool. All 3 cameras were silent during the one moment. Investigators needed them most. Investigators have not publicly stated a definitive reason for why the cameras failed to record during that critical window. But several details uncovered during the investigation have led to an emerging theory. In the days following Nancy's disappearance, agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department began canvassing the Catalina Foothills neighborhood. They asked residents whether they had noticed anything unusual during the night Nancy vanished. But they were also asking a very specific question. Did your internet connection go down that night? Multiple homeowners later confirmed that investigators asked about outages occurring late on January 31st or during the early hours of February 1st. That question became even more significant when a damaged utility box was discovered not far from Nancy's house. Officials confirmed that they were examining whether the damage might be connected to a temporary internet disruption reported in the area around the same time Nancy disappeared. If the connection outage was deliberate, it could explain why several security cameras failed to record properly. Many modern systems depend on wireless internet connections to store or transmit footage. Interrupt that connection, and the cameras may stop capturing data entirely. Some investigators believe the suspect may have used a signal interference device, sometimes called a jammer, to disrupt nearby wireless networks. A small object visible in the suspect's pocket in the doorbell footage has drawn particular attention from analysts reviewing the video. If that theory proves correct, it would suggest the crime was carefully planned. It would mean the person approaching Nancy's home understood how modern security systems function. They would have known that disabling connectivity could prevent cameras from recording or transmitting video. Despite those possibilities, the investigation has produced a frustrating series of near misses. Forensic teams collected DNA samples from the scene, but the results were complicated. According to Sheriff Chris Nanos, the genetic material found outside Nancy's home belonged to more than one individual. The mixture made it difficult for analysts to isolate a single clear profile. Detectives also pursued a potential lead when black gloves were discovered roughly 2.5 miles from Nancy's house. At first, they appeared similar to the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell footage. Testing was conducted, but the DNA recovered from the gloves ultimately belonged to someone with no connection to the case. Even ransom messages complicated the investigation. Several communications demanding payment surfaced in the days after Nancy disappeared. Some were sent to media organizations rather than directly to the family. Authorities later confirmed that at least one person had been charged with sending fake ransom messages unrelated to the actual crime. Meanwhile, the search for Nancy has continued. Her family has offered a reward exceeding $1 million for information leading to her safe recovery. Investigators have deployed helicopters, search teams, and advanced detection equipment throughout the region. Yet after weeks of investigation, the most unsettling detail remains unchanged. The cameras surrounding Nancy Guthrie's home recorded activity before she disappeared. They recorded activity after she vanished. But during the exact moment when someone walked onto that property, disabled the doorbell camera, and possibly carried an elderly woman away into the night, every other camera fell silent. And if you have any information about what happened to Nancy Guthrie, investigators are urging you to come forward. The Federal Bureau of Investigation tip line can be reached at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly at 520-351-4900. Authorities say a combined reward of $1.2 million remains available for information that leads to Nancy's recovery or the arrest of whoever is responsible. If this case left you with questions, The video on your screen right now explores another investigation where security cameras almost revealed the truth. Subscribe so you do not miss it.